in the answers you circled from number 1. What I tend to look for, number 13, what I tend to both look for and fear, however, are evidences that God, church, or religious leaders are really right in the answers you wrote and circled for number 2. Getting more interesting? Number 14, I unconsciously expect God, church, and leaders to make me feel right in what you circled for number 3. Number 14, I unconsciously expect them to make me feel what I circled for number 3. 3. Sorry, number 3. Should be number 3. Should be number 3. And then I wish God, church leaders, would give me number 4, even though unconsciously I don't think they will. Then when my needs are not met or I am under stress, I often feel, write down what you wrote for number 5. When my needs are not met or I'm under stress, I often feel number 5, and I assume that God or the church is responsible for my feelings. Interesting, huh? And finally, and then I often respond this way. Write in what you wrote down in the right column for number 6. When what I really need to do to heal and grow is whatever you think the opposite of number 6 would be. Again, this is adapted from Harville Hendricks' Getting the Love You Want. Let me give you some examples of what I mean by the opposite of number 6, because this is really important, because this is where we can really grow. Let's say that one of the frustrations you experienced with your parents was that you felt like they ignored you, like Luke's parents up above. His response was to get nervous and to act out to try to get attention. So what would be the opposite of acting out to get attention? It might be asking more directly for time and involvement from his parents. It might be acting responsibly and courteously rather than acting goofy. It might mean acknowledging the anxiety he feels and finding more ways to soothe and comfort himself. Those could all be opposites to what he learned to do. So if you can't think of a good opposite to what you wrote down in the right-hand column for number 6, maybe you could ask the person next to you to help you figure one out to expand your repertoire a bit. Does anyone have a response that they wrote down, something that they did as a child that they can't think of a good opposite for? That you'd be willing to admit to 200 people that you don't know? Yeah. Escaped into books. What would be an opposite to escaping into books? What's that? Illiteracy. Illiteracy? No, we don't want to go there. Okay. To do something. Instead of just escaping into the book, to do something active, to engage the person that you were involved with. Probably you learned, however, that didn't work very well when you were a child, or you would have figured that out. And so this is part of the reason that these responses are very challenging for us as adults. We probably tried some of those opposite things and got nowhere with them when we were kids, or we may have gotten criticized, or we may have gotten anger. And so we're kind of nervous about trying those things as adults. And it takes some real effort to take the courage to try something opposite to what we learned to do when we were children. Now, not everyone will have a major aha moment with this exercise, but it can give us another perspective from which to see. Of course, Harville Hendricks uses this exercise to help us better understand our relationship with our spouse, but I found that it works, for me at least, quite well in trying to understand better my relationship with my God, my church leaders, and the things that I have come to expect from them, the feelings that I have that are evoked whenever I'm under stress, but that I ascribe to them, and the things that I can do differently that might help me have a better response from them than what I'm used to. This exercise, however, was developed for people who are in love with each other, and I might even propose that many of us fell in love with the church, precisely because we thought it solved a major heartache or deficiency or problem we once faced. And our love affair is later threatened by precisely the situations that we feel put us right back where we were, in terms of feeling helpless, abandoned, blamed, betrayed, and stuck. Coming to this understanding does not solve all our problems with the church, of course, but it does open up the possibility that we are misperceiving some aspects of these problems from old and familiar blind spots that we can make an effort to correct for. Especially helpful to me is the second part of that number 17 question that suggests that what I really need to do in these situations in order to grow is the opposite of what I learned to do as a child. That overlearned childhood response is probably responsible for keeping me stuck with an old and unworkable solution in my present life. And the opposite response will generally be the hardest, most counterintuitive response for me, but the one that will help me get unstuck. The one that increases my agency instead of leaving me at the mercy of other people or God or the church to change in order for me to feel better. Exploring the idea of what caused us to fall in love with the church a little bit more, consider the question, what are 2 or 3 things that attracted you to the church when you first began exploring it for yourself? For example, if I fell in love with the church because it promised me personal revelation and a sense of belonging, then I may feel particularly betrayed when the process of personal revelation seems to backfire, or be untrustworthy, or when I feel left out or ignored. If I fell in love with the church because it provided answers to my important questions, then I may especially struggle when it seems there are important questions the church isn't answering. If I fell in love with the church because it promised I would again see my dead brother, whom I fought with right before he died, then I may have a particularly hard time accepting unresolved conflicts. So you may want to also consider the question, how might the things in the church that trouble you feel like a betrayal of that early promise? Another common challenge in marital couples is that the very things that attract them to each other become the things that drive them crazy over time. I was very attracted to my husband when I first met him because of his work ethic. He was extraordinarily hardworking. I knew I would never starve married to this man because whatever it took, he would bring home an income. Guess what drives me crazy about my husband today? Any guesses? He's never home, right? That's not true, but yeah, that's the thing then, that over time, the flip side of whatever that is that attracted us to the person becomes the thing that starts to get on our nerves. This is often because there's a weakness that goes with any strength. A flip side of the coin that is the exaggeration or the dark twist on a trait that we love. So if I'm drawn to my spouse because of his outgoing personality and friendliness with strangers, in time I find myself becoming infuriated that he is always drawing me into conversations I'd prefer to avoid, or because casual acquaintances seem to matter to him more than I do. So as you look at number 18, what you wrote down for number 18, about what you loved about the church when you first decided to embrace it, what would be the flip side of that coin? That is, what's the problem created by having too much of that thing you loved or of it getting out of balance? For example, if you love the idea of God calling a prophet today who would provide direction and guidance in a troubled world, are you also bothered by the constraints